Hi, I'm Woody Huffines, and I own the Nerds to Go in McKinney and Frisco, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. Now, what is this encryption stuff, and why is it so important? Encryption is the process or methodology by which we write hidden messages. That's what encryption means. It's from en or en and the Latin or the Greek root kryptos, which is hidden. So to encrypt something is to make it hidden, and to decrypt it is to make it unhidden. And this has been an issue for humankind about as long as we've been around, because the king wanted to communicate with his advisors in the court of the other kingdom and wanted to be able to send private messages back and forth. And originally what the king would do is give it to his messenger, and his messenger would hand carry the piece of paper from one capital to the next capital. And the way it was hidden is the messenger would make sure that he was in constant control of the message. Over time, that's become more important as we communicate classified information and secret information and negotiation information back and forth between people. There were, in the past, some very secure methods of encrypting data. The Enigma machine that the Germans used, which the Japanese also used in the Second World War. But as time has gone on and we've brought more and more computing power to bear, it's easier and easier to decrypt messages. And it's that decryption and that war between the people who wanted to keep things hidden and the people who wanted things exposed has gotten more and more complex. Second World War, Alan Turing designed computers that would break the Enigma code and was able to do some things that made those codes breakable. About the only unbreakable code that there's ever been from a pen and paper standpoint is something called a one-time pad. A one-time pad was a pad, like a notepad of codes, and each page had an encryption algorithm that didn't do a simple letter substitution. Remember the crypto quotes in the newspaper where you'd have an encrypted quote and you'd have to go figure out, does the E and substitute for S, and does the J substitute for K, and how do you go through? And you could figure those out with letter frequency and patterns and things like that. But over time, as computers have gotten involved, any simple substitution code would fall to a decryptor in no time at all. The other way that it was a way for people to communicate and to effectively encrypt things was to use a one-time pad from a book. Let's say over my shoulder here, one of the books is The Complete Verse of Rudyard Kipling. And if I were to communicate to you and say, go buy the Viking copy of Rudyard Kipling's Complete Verses, and I'll send you a message, and when I do, I'll send you a page number, a line number, and a word number. So there'll be a 3-number block that'll indicate the word that I want to have encrypted to the message, and then you could take that and go back. And if somebody didn't figure out which book we were using to encrypt and decrypt the message, that'd pretty much be unbreakable. The problem there becomes, how do we communicate securely what our secret code or our secret book or our one-time pad is going to be? How do you make sure that the adversary doesn't intercept? Like if I sent you an email that said, hey, let's use this book to encrypt our messages. If somebody's trying to break the messages that you and I would send back and forth, if they intercepted that insecure email, then our encryption methodology would be out in the open. So how you moved the key from one person to the next was the big problem in cryptography for a long time. In the 70s and 80s, the courier bags for the CIA would go back and forth to station heads of chief, or the station chiefs. They have CDs, and the CDs that have the encryption algorithms for the month, or the Navy code books. So those things had to be distributed, but if they got lost, anybody that could intercept them then could decrypt the codes. So the challenge is to have a good algorithm that offers strong encryption that somebody can't decrypt just by having the message and the content of the message, and you have to have a good way of communicating what that message is from one place to the other. And that's where public key or public-private key or two-factor key encryption comes into place. How does that work? Well, let's say in the old days, if I wanted to send you private messages, I'd put a box together, and that box would have a private key. And that key could only open that box, and that box could only be opened by that key. So I give you a key, and I have a key, and if I want to send you a message, I lock it in the box and I send it to you, and you use your key to open the box and read the message. But again, we have to be in the same place for us to exchange that key. The idea of public key encryption came about, and the best way to explain it is this way. Let's say that that box has two keys that fit it. One key is my private key, and the other key is the public key. Okay, stay with me. So you got two keys. One is a public key, one is a private key. The public key will open the box once to put an encrypted message in it, but no public key can open that box more than once. Okay? The private key, or my key, opens the box or locks the box. So if I had a box that had two keys, one with a public key and one with a private key, then anybody could send me a private message by using the public key to open the box, to lock the message in it, send it to me. Nobody else can open it except me with my private key. In current encryption algorithms, that's how it works. There's a public key and a private key. So if somebody wants to exchange information, anybody can lock a message or encrypt a message to me using a public key, and then only I can open it because I decrypt it with the private key. So, public key encryption is the idea that anybody can encrypt a message to me using my public key, and only I can decrypt it because I'm the only one that has the private key. So, in public key encryption algorithms, if I want to encode a message to you, I use your public key, which is the key that anybody can get. And when I encrypt the message is now encrypted, and the only way it can be decrypted is for you to use your private key. So every message has two keys. It's got a public key and it has a private key. So somebody can encrypt a message to you, and only you can open the message. Now, how does that work in internet space? Also, with public key encryption, you get the idea of verification. If I encrypt something to you using my key, and I've encrypted it with my key, you can use my public key to verify that I'm the one that encrypted it. That allows for digital signatures, for example. If I encrypt something or digitally sign something with my private key, then you know that it was from me. Well, I don't know if you remember, but 10 or 12 years ago, 15 years ago, before you did something on the internet, you wanted to make sure that you had an HTTPS connection with a secure server. That means that the communication back and forth to the server was secure. And before that became very popular, only 10 or 12% of web traffic was actually encrypted. So, if I went to buy something, for example, I would have to make sure that I was in an HTTPS or secure protocol before I sent my credit card information to a vendor. I want to make sure that I've got a secure and encrypted line of communication so somebody in between couldn't steal my credit card data. At the time, computers were slow enough and the overhead involved with computationally encrypting and decrypting was so great that not everybody used an HTTPS connection. Now, over 80% of connections are HTTPS. And those HTTPS connections means that the stuff that we send back and forth over the internet is encrypted, and someone in the middle can't read that information that's encrypted by the public and private key. So to go back to what we were talking about earlier, how do we establish an encrypted connection over the internet? My browser connects to your server and says, hey, I want to create a secure connection. So your server sends my browser a certificate. It's called an SSL certificate, and it links up who you are and where you are, and it's an encryption certificate. And that certificate that you send back to my browser looks at the certificate and goes, okay, is this expired? Is it registered? Is this a good certificate key? Got it. Heard you. I have this key. So my browser then communicates back. So what happens is that my browser takes your SSL certificate, which is the public key that you use to encrypt things, and it says, got it, and it creates a public key for my browser, and it becomes a session key. So now we have unique keys where anything I send to you, I encrypt with your public key, and anything that you send to me, your server encrypts with its public key, and we establish a secure connection. This is a very important thing for e-commerce and for private communication back and forth over the internet. So after that secured connection is established with a session key, where I've generated one and your server's got its public key, we are able to communicate back and forth through that session. And when we shut the server down, or shut the connection down rather, so when we shut that connection down, those keys go away. And they can be generated on the fly, and they can be generated securely using random numbers and a whole bunch of other really nerdy stuff. But at the end of the day, encryption is important because it allows browsers and servers to communicate privately, and this is primarily for e-commerce reasons. But it is also valuable for other things like a VPN, which we'll talk about the next time that we get together. And it allows for verification that the person that you're connected to is the person that you're supposed to connect to based on the SSL certificate. So, what is encryption? Encryption is the ability to hide messages and to encrypt traffic so that it's hidden or unreadable between anybody but the two people that are communicating. The internet uses a public-private key encryption methodology so that we have a session ID and a session key that allows us to communicate and communicate securely for that session by using SSL certificates. So encryption becomes very important for e-commerce and other things, as well as verifying that you have connected to who you think you've connected to. Encryption, it's really important in the internet. So I'm Woody Huffines with Nerds to Go in McKinney and Frisco, Texas, and this is Tech for the Untechnical. If this information is helpful to you and helps you understand the technical things in your life, click the subscribe button below, ring the notification bell, and when we generate one of these, you'll get a copy of it.